Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Yeah, I think we're all filtering in. Nice to be with you this December Sunday morning, or actually, people are joining us sometimes from all over the world. So wherever you are, welcome. I am Trisha Stotler, and I'm the Executive Director of Programs for the Insight Meditation Community of Washington, D.C. I'm also a teacher, and I host many of these Second Sunday conversations and folks that we bring in from all over to be with us for these events. So I'll be moderating today. And there's also some folks that are going to be watching us via recording. So welcome to those who are not live as well. So this is the second Sunday Dharma series, which is a fundraiser for IMCW. We gather on the second Sunday of every month. We started last January, and we're going to be continuing next year as well. We've got a really exciting lineup of people who will be joining us next year. So we bring kind of inspiring Dharma teachers in to talk with us about the Dharma as it's lived through their life experience, what's alive for them in their practice, what's important to them. And it gives us a wonderful balance of views on the Dharma. So coming up, on January 9th, Tara Brock, our founder and dear friend, will be joining me in a conversation, kind of talking about how we find refuge in our personal practice in this really unstable world. So that's January 9th. Registration's open for that. And then on February 13th, Stephen Batchelor will be joining us to talk about his book, The Art of Solitude. I'm personally really excited for that one. His book is amazing, and he's just such a renowned and wonderful person. He'll be coming from France. So unlike Anushka, who's joining us from California, the time difference is not in their favor. But Stephen is coming from France, so he'll be nice and rested to be joining us. So if you have questions for Anushka during our time together, you can submit them to Ask Questions Here, which should be one of the boxes on your screen. And we'll have some time at the end of this session where we hope to get through 3 or 4 questions that come up during the talk. And yes, welcome to Miyako Villanueva, who is, as always, providing our ASL, and we're so grateful. We're so grateful for her services. Yeah. So without further ado, I'm really excited to have Anushka Fernandopulle here with us. Anushka is a spirit rock teacher, and I first crossed paths with Anushka a long time ago at one of the Buddhist Insight Network events, and was really impressed with her take on the Dharma as it applies to many different things. So this morning she'll be talking about the Dharma and nature. And I book all the speakers, so I'm super excited about everyone. And welcome, Anushka. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Hello, I am CW. I'm speaking to you from San Francisco, as Trisha mentioned, and thank you for inviting me here. Here in San Francisco, it's a bit gray. It's about 8 a.m. here, and rainy, which is about our kind of winter. I'm actually kind of a local to your area. I grew up in Baltimore, and then so I'm a Marylander. And my family now lives in kind of the Maryland suburbs of DC. So I do spend some time in that area. Should be there actually in about a week for holidays. So my visit to the colder climes from the mild Bay Area. And I've lived here for about 20 years in the San Francisco area. I've been on the Teachers Council at Spirit Rock, and throughout my life, I've had a connection to nature. I appreciate nature and hiking and seeing animals in nature. So I wanted to explore with you this theme about Dharma and nature for this session. And I'll say up front that, it's interesting to consider what is the meaning of the word Dharma. And the Buddha's teachings are called Dharma, but the translation of that has a variety of different meanings. And one of the translations of that is the truth of the way things are. Another translation is nature. So that what we're understanding, what we're seeking to understand and integrate into our being, you could say, as we practice Dharma, is actually nature. So we're trying to understand nature and live in alignment with that. And it can help to recognize that there are ways in which, in more mundane ways, we've been exploring nature all of our life. Even if you identify very much as an urban person and you don't actually self-identify as liking nature, there's a way in which we're always ensconced in nature and living within the laws of that, you could say. So, for example, one aspect of nature that we have explored, discovered, and actually as adults primarily learned to live in alignment with is the law of gravity. So sometimes you'll see babies who don't know about this law yet exploring that or experimenting with that. And you might see a baby sitting in the high chair, and then, maybe they will drop something off. They'll drop something off and like, oh, look, it fell to the ground. Okay. They're not saying that verbally, of course. And then, like, oh, what happens if you put it on this side here? Like, oh, yeah. Oh, same thing happens. It also will fall to the ground. And then, what happens if you do it when you're not looking, right? That also falls to the ground. So after a while, you get the sense that like, oh, there's some thing going on where if I try to place something in midair, it just falls to the ground. And you don't have to know the mathematical formula for that. You don't have to understand if somebody is running that law or situation. You just have to understand the way things operate and then learn to live in alignment with that. So as adults, primarily we have. So for example, if I want to put this glass of water somewhere, I know from my previous experience, it's not good to put it in midair or it will fall to the ground like everything else did, crash, break, splash around, possibly short out the electronic equipment and so on. So living in alignment with the law of gravity, with this aspect of nature, means that I place it on this table here. You can't see that. This is a bit of a limitation in our Zoom world, but I just put it on the table. You didn't hear any broken glass. And then it's fine, right? And then if by some chance, accidentally, I push something off the table and it falls to the ground, I've already understood that law. And so then I can just pick it up and put it back. So I don't have to have added drama. So there's not added drama like, why me? Why now? Why is this happening? It's just like, oh yeah, I understood that. It's the law of gravity. Like, figured it out, pick it up, put it back. No added friction like that. So parallel is the things that we're trying to understand through our practice and through the teachings of the Buddha are about sort of learning how to live in alignment with nature, with the truth of the way things are. And the more that we can do that naturally, then we can live with less dukkha, less suffering, less strain, less friction, less unnecessary difficulty for ourselves and also for others. So some of the aspects of this natural law include that our actions have results. So this is briefly stated that law of karma. So the intentions behind our actions have results. So we want to live in a way that is harmonious with others. And this includes the training precepts that many of you will be familiar with. So we want to avoid killing living beings or harming living beings. We want to avoid taking things that are not ours, causing stress in that way. We want to avoid harm with our sexuality, sexual energy, sexual activity. We want to avoid false speech or harmful speech, including gossip, slander, or some kinds of abusive speech or lying. And then finally, we want to avoid taking into our body the kinds of intoxicants that will cause us to forget all those previous guidelines and act in ways that we later regret. So all of this is actually living in alignment, in harmony with the truth of the way things are, that, yeah, other beings feel pain when we cause harm to them. So we want to refrain from that. Another aspect of this Dhamma as nature includes, in some ways, like a more tactile way of recognizing ourselves as not separate from the environment around us. And I think as human beings, we have fallen into a sense of separation from and superiority over other beings and over the earth itself. And that has caused a lot of difficulty and harm to the planet. So now there's some awareness growing about climate change, and we all have different experiences of this depending where you live, of hurricanes, tornadoes. Here in California, there are a lot of forest fires now, very cold temperatures, very hot temperatures, a lot of flooding, a lot of different ways in which for us as humans, our activities have impacted the earth. And partly it's based on our delusion that we are separate from, and in some ways that we can own or control nature. So the Buddha actually had a handle on this in 6th century BC, and that which he talked about in the Satipatthana Sutta. So this is one of the main teachings of the Buddha that gives the instructions for meditation that the insight meditation or vipassana is based on. There's a whole section that is about mindfulness of the body. And within that section of mindfulness of the body, there's one segment of it that is about recognizing the elements of nature in our body. So this is kind of one particular angle on awareness of the body that it is helpful to cultivate. It's kind of based on an ancient categorization of the elements, you could say. So earth, air, fire, water. So we're recognizing that just as there is earth, air, fire, water externally, actually our body is comprised of, in some way, all of these elements. So both scientifically speaking, we take in water and drink it, and that becomes part of our blood, our saliva, all of the different liquid elements of the body. We take in food, and the food is grown from the earth and has in it elements like calcium, nutriments, and then those kinds of elements of, you could call earth element, enter our body and both give us energy, but also create the building blocks of everything, the bones, the teeth, the skin. We are also subject to the fire element, which is the heat element. And you can actually tune into this and notice the ways in which the earth, when it is warm, when the sun is there, our body gets warmer. And then like now in the winter, when it gets darker and colder outside, then also we feel that coldness inside too. And then the air element is all around us, and we're constantly in contact with that through our breath, through our breathing. So we are completely dependent upon and connected to the elements of nature. We are not actually separate from those. And that's also why it's important that there's clean water, clean air, that the earth is not on fire, because we as humans are actually quite fragile. We require kind of very limited set of circumstances for us to be able to thrive. And when you kind of tune into this element, you can see that we're spending a lot of energy and actually constantly making adjustments in order to make sure that we have the correct conditions for our bodies in relationship to the elements to allow ourselves to be okay. So this includes, putting on and taking off jackets, or making sure your heater is working properly, or, making sure you have enough and the right kind of food. You're thirsty and you need water. Once we actually start to pay attention like this, we can see like, oh yeah, I'm actually completely dependent upon these elements. And factually speaking, we will actually die very soon if we don't get water, within a very short time. Food, we can last a little bit longer. But still, we're dependent on that. If we don't get food for maybe a week or something, depending, it won't be good for us. Body will not continue to function. Air, even more quickly needed, probably a minute or two before we notice our dependence on that. And even heat element, we're not always in circumstances where we're privy to that, but if we are in a circumstance where it's too cold or too hot, also very quickly we will perish. So we can actually tune into these elements, both conceptually understanding this and reflect on it as we look at water or taste food, or are aware when we turn on the heating in our car or something like that. We also can practice noticing these elements in the body with mindfulness. And as we notice these elements in the body, also we can tune into the fact that these elements are subject to what would they call 3 characteristics, 3 marks of existence. So this includes that all of these aspects are continuously changing. So the temperature of the body is changing, the fluid in the body constantly changing, right? The earth element constantly changing, air element comes in and out, constantly changing. So in this way also, because it's always in flux and changing, there's not really something in the elements for us to stand on or hold on to or take refuge permanently. So this is a way in which we can recognize that this body is part of nature, is dependent on nature. And in that way, it doesn't make sense to identify with or try to take refuge in the body or try to make it permanently stay in one state. And from that also can be extrapolated then that there is no real me in a way that we could claim ownership of something that we can control or own or even identify with in some way. It's more like, the body as we recognize the way in which the elements are always changing is just like the waves on the ocean or the clouds moving through the sky, something like that. So we can recognize this both kind of conceptually, intellectually, as we reflect in this way, but we can also practice with this meditatively. So I want to guide you in a short meditation in which we'll practice with noticing the elements in the body, okay? So I invite you to find a posture where you can be comfortable for a short time. Maybe we'll do 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And it can be good to have your feet on the ground, or if you're sitting on the ground, to have a stable posture where you can feel connected and not needing to be adjusting a lot if possible. And we can begin by taking a deep breath in. And as we exhale, we can allow ourselves to come into connection with the sense of our body sitting, the connection to the ground, the floor, your cushion, chair. You might feel some sense of the solidity there through the pressure in your butt or through your feet on the ground. So this is the earth element. You're literally connected to the earth in this way. And any of these sense of solidity is also aspects of the earth element. As we sit, we might feel the heaviness of the body. You might feel through the shoulders. You might feel your hands resting on each other. So all of these elements that are these harder elements of the body, like the bones, the teeth, nails. So ways we can tune into the earth element. It can be harder with this element to notice the changeability of it, because it seems relatively stable, even though some aspects like the hair or fingernails, we can notice that growing, maybe not moment to moment, but over some days or weeks. You can see the aliveness through that. And there's all aspects of the earth element and the ways in which it's changing. So if you like, you can take a deep breath in. And as you do that, you might feel your skeleton moving, kind of the ribs expanding. You can feel this earth element in motion. You can see if there's any unnecessary tension in your jaw or face. Take another deep breath in, and as you exhale, just try to relax that. So next we'll tune into the air element. So this is the quality of expansion and contraction. You can feel it most obviously through the breath, which for many of us is the anchor that we use for meditation. So we can just tune in for a little while to the sense of the body breathing, wherever it's easiest for you to notice this. And as you do, notice how we're in constant connection to what we call the outside or the environment through this breath. And you can tune in to the way in which even the experience of the breath is always changing. From the beginning of the in-breath, as it expands, you can notice if there's a break between in-breath and out-breath. Beginning of the out-breath, and then the end of the out-breath. So what we call even one breath is made of many different parts and is always changing. Can't capture it some way. So we've been paying attention to the air element with the breath. You can also get a sense of the fire element, of the qualities of heat energy, even through paying attention to one breath. So it could be that the in-breath might feel cooler as we draw in air from outside. And then it could be that the out-breath can feel warmer as the air departs from this body. Good. You can see what it's like for yourself. You can also notice this fire element of heat, energy in other parts of the body. You can notice what might be the warmest part of your body right now. Could be it's under the arms or where your legs are folded. It could be it's in your belly, particularly if you've just eaten something and if there's digestion happening. You can also notice where it's coolest. Sometimes this is where the skin is exposed to the air, the hands or the face. And then you can notice also the ways in which this fire element, the heat element, is changing. So some places might be getting warmer, some parts getting cooler, and nothing's stable with that either. Now, if the heat element is strong anywhere in the body, you might already be noticing the next element, which is the water element. So sometimes you can feel this in areas where there might be sweat. Or you might feel this in areas like inside of your mouth with the saliva. Or other moist areas like the eyeballs. Or even feeling the gushiness in your belly. A significant portion of our body is made up of the water element. In fact, about 3/4 of the body is supposed to be made of water. So that includes the blood, the saliva, all the different fluids of the body. It's also about the same percentage that the earth is made of, water. So another way in which our bodies reflect the environment around us. This water element represents this quality of liquidity, but it also has a characteristic of cohesion in some ways. So kind of like how if you add water to dirt, it becomes mud, or if you add water to flour, it will become like a dough. And we can feel it most strongly through the direct liquid element of the body, or if you're having a hard time contacting, you can even just feel your pulse at your wrist or at your neck. So if you feel that pulsing, that's the blood coursing through your body. So this water element comes from nature. We get the water from the rain that comes into reservoirs. We get it through the pipes that bring it into our homes. We pour it out through the faucets and drink it. We shower with it. So here we're directly in connection with this element of nature. So you can rest again with whichever of the elements is easiest for you to tune into. Just feeling the ways in which this body is itself part of nature. All of these continuously changing elements dependent on and connected to the environment around us. Can learn to recognize this and live in harmony with this. So this is one dimension of practice of mindfulness that you can cultivate. You can also cultivate this understanding through reflection. And I think they sent an article that I wrote about paying attention to the elements even in an urban setting, because you don't have to be in a national park to notice this stuff. So as I was mentioning about the water element, it's there in your house. It's there in your apartment through the faucets, through the toilets. And then there's a way in which, just as we have these circulatory systems of the body, your building has a circulatory system. Your city has a circulatory system through the sewers and through the water pipes. So we can recognize all of that and see the ways in which we're connected to that and very similar to that. You can notice the heat element through your heating system, your HVAC system, through the vents that there are in your home as they might be blowing hot air, or through the windows as you let in cool air sometimes. You can notice the earth element in most of the hard things around you, like your desk or even your computer or tablet that you're viewing this through is made of earth element, made of metal or wood. So these are all aspects of the earth. So are the walls of your building, probably made of either some drywall, like concrete stuff, which is like ground stone kind of, or wood or brick. So all earth element. You can notice fire element also as energy comes through the lights in your apartment, or even the light coming from your screen now could consider some form of fire element. So in this way, we can be curious about and remind ourselves of the way in which there are these elements externally and there are these elements internally. And those of you who are familiar with Satipatthana Sutta know that this is part of the refrain in all of the different aspects of it, about the body, about the mind, about this feeling tone or Vedana, is about mindfulness internally and externally. And sometimes people don't know how to do that, the external part. Focus on meditation as purely internal. I think this aspect of the four elements practice is a relatively easy way for us to connect with that. So a few more things I'll say about this, and then I'll take some questions from folks. The fire element is an interesting one. This is, of course, an ancient categorization. So now we have, what is it, like 100 some, maybe 200 elements. There's a much more detailed kind of categorization of nature. So if this earth, air, fire, water doesn't totally work for you, you could play with it as kind of solid, liquid, gas, and energy, and recognizing those as external and internal building blocks of the body. So the fire element was considered like each of us have a sort of life force that's burning inside of us. And they considered it like almost like a log that's burning in you and creating this energy. And that you don't know how big your log is. So you don't know how long that log burns, and that impacts your lifespan. So this is true, actually, still, not that there's a log burning inside of you, but that none of us know how long we're going to live. And there's another reflection that Buddha encourages us to tune into is that, this body being part of nature will return to the elements of nature after death. Once we die, and all of us will die, just as all animals will die, or all plants grow and die at different times. So it's some kind of mysterious way in which, like, we don't know how long our life is going to be. So this can be not something to make us depressed or fearful, but actually to call upon us to be awake as much as possible, to tune in, because we don't know when it's going to end. Also, interestingly, with this fire element, there's this idea that in the beginning of your life, babies are kind of like smooth skin and moist. And then as you get older, as this log burns up, your skin starts to get wrinkled. Your hair gets a little gray, or maybe a lot gray. And this is like the ash from the fire manifesting. I have some here now, like you can see, maybe you can see in the, as it's coming along, you might also. So of course, now when they've done autopsies, they don't actually find a log inside people, but it's an interesting concept to consider in this way. I'll say one more thing about, just generally speaking, this idea of recognizing ourselves as part of nature. So important both, as I had mentioned in the beginning, regarding our impact on the environment, but particularly poignant at this moment regarding this pandemic that is still going on. So this has really brought to the forefront the ways in which we are all connected to each other through the air that we breathe. And we can inadvertently, through breathing out some virus particles, like infect each other or harm each other. And so this is why it's so important for us to protect each other with care, with a sense of kindness, compassion, through wearing masks when we're around others in places that we might infect each other. It's both a protection for yourself and for others. And then also, now that there are vaccinations, which there were not 1 year ago at this time, or maybe they were just starting about a year ago this time, it's a way for us to protect ourselves and others. And in some ways, like, we're in a group project here. The group project is trying to have less people die painful, lonely deaths of COVID here, right? Trying to protect each other. So just an urge for you to consider that. And if you can, to get vaccinated, to protect each other, to mitigate ways in which we might harm each other through this pandemic. It's just still ongoing over 2 years. Now, some people think like, oh, well, is it a spiritual thing to take a vaccine? And the Buddha allowed for his monastics 4 things. So food, clothing, shelter, and medicine. So medicine is definitely allowed as part of Buddhist tradition. And we're fortunate that if we have access to these vaccines, we should take them to help support our own health and the health of others. Also, sometimes a misunderstanding people have is from this verse in the Dhammapada that is, mind is the forerunner of all things. So then sometimes people extrapolate that to think like, oh, then I should be able to, with my mind, create a reality, or with my mind, I should be able to control the body. But that's a misunderstanding of the teaching. The body is part of nature, and as such is subject to the laws of nature, including getting sick or getting harmed and eventually dying. So that doesn't have to do with your mind. There's no thought in your mind that will be able to prevent you from dying. And it's very good to take precautions, as I mentioned, but also our body is subject to various injuries and getting sick. So it's good to keep that in mind and protect ourselves and protect others in that way. So there seems to be some kind of delusionary thinking that is widespread now about this. And people feel like, oh, I don't believe in COVID, or I don't believe in vaccines. And it doesn't work to, just because you believe it, it doesn't mean that it's not happening in the realm of germ theory or virus theory or science. So just like, if you want to take your dog to a kennel, you can't say, oh, my dog doesn't believe in rabies, so I'm not getting the dog vaccinated. Like, they won't allow the dog in the kennel. It doesn't matter whether the dog believes in rabies or not. Like, it's possible it had rabies, and if it has rabies, it could give it to other dogs. So you're not going to get into the kennel. So in this way, it's good for us to be humble as human beings. We're really like just these mammals. We're not that different than dogs or, other animals. And yeah, we could inadvertently be carrying some disease. So it's good to protect ourselves. It's a part of the precepts, I think. So urging us all to keep that in mind. So maybe I'll pause there. Thank you for listening to the Dhamma. And I'll see if there's questions that people have, or if there's anything you want me to expand upon. I'm happy to do so.
Yeah, thank you, Anushka. We have a question from Maya that was pre-submitted that addresses the latter part of what you were talking about. She wrote, I love this topic and I find it both a relief to be part of something larger and anxiety inducing at the same time. What's a good practice for the anxiety that arises when I come up against the reality that this body too will dissolve? So just a small question.
Yeah, I'd say two things about that. So one is that it's actually true, right? That the body is subject to illness, aging, death, right? Just like all entities. And this is one aspect of what the Buddha talked about as dukkha, right? So it is stressful, like it's stressful, it's strain, it's unsatisfactory, it's suffering, right? So there's a way in which, as we recognize that, it's good to allow yourself to open to that and actually feel the poignancy of that. There's really a poignancy, a tenderness that we can then tune into for all beings, including ourselves, that we're all subject to this, like the ones you like and the ones you don't like, right? Like the small ones, the cute ones, every which one, like we're all subject to that. So partly it's that you don't necessarily need to look for a solution to the discomfort that comes. It could be more like, allowing yourself to open to and feel that, but tune in with compassion, really. So feeling that, like the compassion that can come from recognizing it's all out of our control, and with COVID, this is like so much the case because it's such a highly infectious disease. And especially as these newer variants come, like the Delta was more infectious than the previous one. And this Omicron's even more infectious, so it's like, okay, I can do what I can, but it's not under my control. That could be super stressful if you're trying to control everything. Or there's practice of like, okay, do what I can. And then in some ways, with as much equanimity as possible, recognize it's not in my control, right? So second part of the answer, first part is allow the discomfort, open to it, and you could label that and recognize that as dukkha. The second part is the cultivation of the Brahma Viharas of metta. So metta, very good antidote to fear. If it feels like there's a lot of anxiety arising, doing metta for yourself. Compassion practice, karuna, may I be free from suffering. May all beings be free from suffering. Just as simple as that, just tuning into that in relationship to this aspect of dukkha. And then the equanimity, which is in some ways the most mature one and hardest to cultivate, about staying balanced in the face of all this uncertainty.
Yes, thank you. And yeah, I kind of tuned into the first part of the question, which was around, I find it both a relief to be part of something larger. So there's that like inherent knowing that we're mammals and we're subject to the impermanence and the coming and going and everything. And sometimes that's cool to relaxing, to feel I'm part of something larger. I can, relinquish control. But wait a second.
Yeah.
To this yeah.
Totally. It's both sides. And, like many people in pandemic, I have become a pandemic birder. So even the distinction between sort of mammals and other beings, like I've started paying attention to these other feathered beings who are flying above that I largely didn't pay that much attention to prior to this. And in that, it's like, okay, expanding from sort of mammal category to just living beings and recognizing this kind of like fascinating, rich whole world of these other living creatures above. And yeah, it can be very restful and comforting to be in nature and to recognize all this life around too, and to feel ourselves as part of that. So yeah, I find that a comforting aspect of being in nature. And even in cities, like you can find little parks, right? Like you have Rock Creek Park down there and many other parks that are like ways in which you can see birds and nature, and yeah, encourage you to do that.
And the pandemic has supposedly been great for birds and nature, that the condors are even like reproducing more out near you, which is wonderful. Yeah, you lock the humans up for a little while and all of a sudden you really see the impact and the interconnectedness of everything.
Yeah, I think that's been true in many places actually, and apparently in the DMZ zone in Korea, like where people hadn't been able to be for a long time, there are all these like animals that are kind of thriving because like humans are not knocking around. Or in Sri Lanka, where my family is like originally from, in the areas where there was a war for 25 years. So for a while there was like areas that people didn't go. It wasn't safe for people, but then the animals were like thriving there mostly. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks. We have another question from Byron. That, let me see if I can interpret this. Byron says, I live in DC, and the question is, do you know of any community type ceremonies that can help to evoke that sense of the four elements in an urban setting? So I think, yeah, I kind of get the gist of Byron's question is around, you know, how to do this in community, kind of formally recognize that this is the way it is. So I don't know if you have anything that comes to mind around, you know, taking this realization that we are part of this earth and all of these elements, and kind of taking it off the cushion.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this way in which this practice lends itself to also reflection of like seeing the earth element in the buildings, seeing it in the, even in seeing the sewers, right? The water element through there, seeing in the street lights, the fire element, like that. You could go on a sort of urban four elements walk with people, you know, and just point out to each other like the different elements as you go along. And it could be like you spend one section doing earth element, one section doing air element, one section fire element, one section water element, something like that. Like that could be a fun thing to do with others if they're tuned into it. So I'd say like that, sort of coupled with doing a sit in which you practice recognizing these elements in the body through mindfulness as you can feel them, could be a kind of fun way to do it.
Yes. Oh, I love the idea of a you know, more like a city walk around to kind of notice what's, because you're right, Washington DC is a pretty green city, so we're fairly lucky that you know, we're not all concrete, but
yeah. But even in the concrete, I'm saying like if you live in a place that's not, like if you really tune in, it's like, oh yeah, the concrete, that's like rock stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like that's actually earth element, right?
Yeah.
Sidewalk, like, so you're never divorced from it. There's not stuff that's like not from the earth that's around.
Yes. Yeah.
Even the traffic lights, you see the light from the traffic lights or like the walk signal, like that could be seen the fire element.
That's true. Yeah. There's really not a place where these elements are not kind of made of everything. I've got a question for you that kind of came to me while you were talking, in that, so, and a little bit like what Maya was asking in the original question, that, oh yes, that it, the realization that we're part of something larger helps to depersonalize, kind of helps to take the self kind of out of this realization. Like if I'm doing a meditation where I'm kind of focusing on just the interconnectedness of all things, it can be a really expansive experience and really help to ground in the truth of that. And then there's some other teachings around the preciousness of this human life, like the specialness of being a human being. And in the sense that, it's like 1 in 1,000,000 that were kind of graced with a human rebirth or a human birth. And so I was kind of juxtaposing those things in my mind as you were talking, because I think that we do make ourselves out to be special. And like you were saying with the mind teaching, that I can figure this out, or I can have dominion over the other things. And I don't know if there's anything from your other Dharma well that you have to say about that, because I don't think they're opposites. I think they're kind of speaking to the same thing, but it can get confusing in the Dharma.
Yeah, in this aspect of the 4 elements, it's in the body section of the Satipatthana. So it's really pointing to the physical body. And even if, human beings would be, if it's considered a fortunate birth, to be a human being, it's not because we have a superior physical body to any other beings, right? Like, it's not because we're like cooler, like birds can fly, like we can't fly, like we can swim okay, but we don't have like webbed toe, so it's not because we're physically superior to other beings. So in that way, we are actually equal to that. And then, arguably for some purposes, like less good at some things, but that this physical body is really just the same, like dependent on food and water and, the correct temperature and stuff like that. So yeah, just to say the superiority, or like that it's a fortunate birth, it doesn't so much have to do with our physical body, right, structure in some ways. And even that being said, right, within the human realm, there's a wide variety of births that people can take, both in terms of the physical body and in terms of like how much suffering there is in the body from the get-go, and then also the circumstances in terms of like wealth or comfort that one is born into, or how hard one has to work, right, to like just get basic needs met and stuff like that. So it's kind of a mixed bag within the human realm too, right? I think the primary thing about that, precious human birth thing is like, they were getting a bit into cosmology. Since you brought it up, I'll talk about this, that like, there are realms, even within the human realm, but in Buddhist teaching considered like other realms in which there's so much suffering that like you don't have a moment to take your mind up to do something like reflect about Dhamma, and then there's other realms in which everything is so good and so pleasant that like you have no incentive to, because it seems like everything is cool, right? So there are human realms like this too, where people can maybe like, if they're not totally paying attention, they can have all of their needs catered to, right? And in general, the human realm is considered like a good mix of like not 100% suffering all the time, but also enough suffering to keep kicking you in the pants to be like, hey, keep practicing, keep reflecting, right? So one way of applying that in practice, I think, is like maybe you do have periods of time in which you have a lot of pleasantness, right? And a lot of what I'm talking about is actually related to this Vedana, right? That we have a mix of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral in our life. And then there's how we kind of relate to that. But in moments when you get the wake-up call, whether it's through potentially being sick or having some injurious thing happen to you, or even just like day-to-day whatnots, car accidents or losing something, or the weather being not what you want, like any version of dukkha, is allow that to remind you like, oh yeah, this is, things are out of my control, in this existence. And otherwise, if you have a sort of like relatively affluent, comfortable life, then you don't have to face that so often. Like you can get the illusion that things are under your control because, if it's too cold, I can turn the thermostat up, and, it's like, if it's too hot, I can do this, and, but yeah, no, basically it's not under our control. So it's good to remember that and sort of allow that dukkha to wake us up to that. And then, to hold with compassion. That's true for us and for all other beings too. Yeah. And then, related to that is like, so then how do we relate to each other? And the teachings are also to cultivate like wholesome responses to each other. So try to relate with kindness, try to relate with compassion, and then try to relate with generosity, right? So the dana, generosity, is a important aspect of our practice too, like as much as formal meditation, actually practicing generosity, so with each other. And then I know this is a benefit for the organization, right, this series. So supporting organizations that are doing good things in the world, supporting movements through donations and through your own efforts and volunteering and work. And so when we teach Dhamma in these cases, many of you will know if you go to retreat centers. So usually the Dhamma is offered freely, and then you're given an opportunity to make donations towards the teacher, towards the continuation of the teachings. And it's a very interesting and kind of radical structure, for doing something in the world. So, I teach I'm on the Teachers Council at Spirit Rock. I teach there. I also teach at IMS in Massachusetts, closer to your realm. I teach at Gaia House in the UK, various places. And, we just show up there and then teach and then, receive whatever people want to offer. And I think it's not a mistake that it's set up like that. Like that is encouraging people to practice generosity, to cultivate that aspect as well. So it's an important aspect of the practice. In the US, actually, during this time of year, the holiday season, there's like kind of some juxtaposition of materialism and generosity. Like there is some encouragement of generosity, like to donate to organizations or give food to people who are hungry, or, give gifts for those who can't afford them or something like that. At the same time, there's like a massive kind of materialism going on, like buy more stuff, keep the economy rolling kind of thing. And I'll say on that front, like there's a lot of generosity that you see even, online, like people are asking for donations for healthcare stuff or for basic expenses. And when I see those things, I always think like, oh, it's actually good that people respond often, with generosity, but it also is a sign that kind of systemically our society is not working. Like that people need to do GoFundMe to get cancer treatment paid for, or food for their children or something like that. Or, that many, if not most Americans are like one disaster away from being homeless. That's like not okay. Like that's a kind of systemic issue. So there's something about the cultivation of individual generosity, but just to say there also is something about paying attention to and addressing the parts of the system that are not oriented towards kindness, compassion, like supporting life too. That's important too. And I know many people are doing work in various ways with nonprofits or even in government to try to promote policies that are more positive for human life. So,
yeah. No, thank you for that reminder. And kind of our take on generosity is another way that we recognize the interconnectedness of things. That the United States is kind of a very unique experiment in the world, but how we can see ourselves as siloed from others and, maybe not aware of the needs of other people. It's an interesting perspective that in some other places, it's more of a natural, there's more of a symbiotic relationship with people in a town or community, of taking care of each other, and people live closer together. It's just a really timely and interesting reflection on how to take care of each other in this time, and just that interconnectedness, which reflects back on the elements. We're all made of the same stuff, kind of arising in different circumstances. Yeah, for sure. So I want to read a question from Brian that was pre-submitted as well. Let me just check to see if I have any others coming. So this is what Brian writes. And I think he's here on the screen today. So The Woodstock Manifesto in 1969 included getting back to the land and setting our soul free. We are stardust. I'm singing along with Brian's comment. Get back to the garden. Little Crosby, Stills and Nash reference. It sounds so innocent and healthy and hopeful and alive. Getting back to the land, the garden. Listen and look around. What condition is the land in now? Are we too busy setting our own souls free? If you were to write a call for direction and action for present times, what would it be? So another lighthearted question. If you were to write a call for direction or action for present times in regards to our relationship to all that is, to nature, what would it be?
Okay, interesting.
I should have prepped you with this one ahead of time.
Yeah, you could have sent it to me. Okay, let's see. What would be a call? And that maybe everyone can do this. Everyone can consider this. What would be your call, right? I'll try an answer, but everyone can come up with what their own answer might be. Let's just take a moment and pause and consider, huh? Yeah, maybe I'd have a very simple one myself to just say, we're all part of nature. We all belong to each other. So let's treat each other with care. And the we in that includes the birds, the people, the earth, the planet, everything.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So we're getting close to the end of our time here. It always goes by so fast, and I wish we had more time. But yeah, I don't know, Anushka, if you could maybe lead us in a little kind of closing meditation.
Sure.
Round out our time.
And yeah, I'll tell people also that if they want to find out more of my what I'm up to, you could look up here. I'll put the website in the chat.
Great.
I think there, website, and happy to see any of you in retreats or practice. I actually do an Instagram Dharma that I've been doing since the beginning of the pandemic. It used to be weekly. Now it's like every other week kind of thing. But if those of you on Instagram, it's the information is on that website. It's Anushka_Dharma. And now I've been doing it like Wednesday mornings at 8 a.m. Pacific, but I record it and it's up there. So if you want to be part of the Insta Sangha, you're welcome to that, or other retreats and things. And then, yeah, if you want to practice dana, make donations, there's also info there, how you can support me. In Venmo, it's at Anushka F, or PayPal, anushkasangha@gmail.com. But let's sit together. We'll do another brief practice of appreciating our efforts here today.
Thank you.
So coming into connection again with the body. It's possible to feel the earth element through our connection with the ground, and helpful to remember that we can always remember the groundedness that's there. The earth is supporting us. The earth can help us hold whatever it is that's going on. So we can appreciate ourselves for taking the time to listen to the Dhamma and to do practice and to be curious about these teachings. We can appreciate our own urge for well-being and liberation in whatever way that shows up. We can appreciate our virtual Sangha here, or community that we practiced with. And appreciate all of the organizers who pulled us together. And appreciate the Dhamma itself that can lead us to liberation, well-being. May we all be well, peaceful, and happy. May we all be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May we all continue to grow in wisdom and in love for our benefit and the benefit of all beings.
Thank you so much for spending this too brief time with us today. I hope you'll come back another time. Yeah, it would be lovely to have you again. And so to everyone else, just remember that we're here every second Sunday, and you can check out the lineup of what's coming up on the IMCW website under special events. And we will be following up with the recording from this talk. You'll be receiving an email in the next week or so, and we'll include Anushka's links in there as well. I see that Shannon has put up the Instagram Dharma, which now I'm going to have to go check out. So have a wonderful day, everyone. We really appreciate your time and your presence. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Happy holidays to everyone.
Happy holidays. Bye, everyone.